Greetings. My name is Henry Jarrett, and I'm putting right now my Triangle Interfaith Alliance hat on. I currently serve as president of the Triangle Interfaith Alliance. I would like, before we get any further into the session, ask that we have a moment of silence, just briefly, remembering all those who have perished in the pandemic. We passed the milestone of 500,000 people who have perished in the United States. So if we can remember those folks, their friends, their families, all those who were affected by their loss. And also remember all the frontline workers, particularly those working in our hospitals, our congregant living facilities, who are directly working. So if we can just have a brief moment of silence, that'd be appreciated. Thank you. Again, like I said, I'm Henry Jarrett. I'm president of the Triangle Interfaith Alliance. We have been around since 1996, so this is our 25th year. We represent many different faiths, including Christians, Baha'i, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs. And so we're pleased to, the Jewish faith, since today is the Yom Purim. And we have many members who are represented here tonight in this gathering. And I will put some information about our organization in the chat. So if you want to get more information about us, there'll be a link in the chat to the Triangle Interfaith Alliance. Now I'm also going to put on, you get a 2-for-1 with me. I'm also president of the Methodist Federation for Social Action. We are one of the other partners in this event tonight. And we've been around, or the national organization's been around since 1907, and the North Carolina chapter, North Carolina Conference chapter of Methodist Federation for Social Action has been around since the mid-80s. We're not official part of the United Methodist Church, but we function as an advocate for social justice, both inside and outside the United Methodist Church, but we do not receive any direct funding. But one of the things that we're concerned about is civil rights and voting rights. And we definitely are concerned about our state of our democracy. How this event came about is that usually this would be the annual dinner for the Triangle Interfaith Alliance. So our Triangle Interfaith Alliance board decided that maybe we could partner with some other organizations to put on this event. So we partnered with first the North Carolina Council of Churches, and we're very glad that they are hosting this event and provided the registration for this. So thank you very much to the North Carolina Council of Churches, and also approached Methodist Federation for Social Action if they would be interested in hosting this event as well. And then, of course, we are very pleased that Reverend T. Anthony Spearman, who is currently serving as the president of the North Carolina NAACP, accepted our invitation to speak. I won't get too far in the introduction. I'm going to let Jennifer handle that. But he also at one time was also president of the North Carolina Council of Churches. So there's one housekeeping thing. At the bottom of your screen, there is what's called a live transcript. So you can get captioning. So just click that and you'll be able to see the get captioning while someone's speaking. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer now to do the further introduction, let her introduce our speaker for tonight.
Thank you, Henry, and thanks to all of you who come out for this event tonight. We at the North Carolina Council of Churches are pleased to be partnering with our interfaith neighbors in a very formal way tonight. We partner with our interfaith neighbors informally on multiple occasions, but here we're making it very public. Let me offer you another public event that may be of interest to our interfaith neighbors. And we can drop this in the chat window as well, but I would invite you to register for a documentary called Braided Prayer. And Braided Prayer is a documentary about 3 musicians, one Christian, one Jewish, and one Muslim, who formed a band together and have cut several albums. We're especially proud of them because the Christian in the group is a former staff member of the North Carolina Council of Churches, David Lamott, who also wrote the hymn that brought you into the waiting room and into this event tonight. So that's coming up just in a couple weeks. So please join us. A few words about the North Carolina Council of Churches. We are in our 86th year, having just finished our anniversary year, founded in 1935, with 5 priority issues in that very first meeting, one of which was race relations, to use language from 1935. Because the North Carolina Council of Churches was one of the first places in the South to make race relations, what some of us now call racial equity, a primary topic. We also became, a few years later in 1941, one of the first places where Black and white faith leaders sat together at the same table to talk about issues of mutual interest to them as equal partners at the table. And we have maintained this work, of course, over the 85 years, expanding our emphasis areas into places like healthcare, the environment, criminal justice. And I can't wait for T. Anthony to tell you about their criminal justice win that has just emerged in the last few days. But these are all areas that the council cares deeply about. And in each of these areas, what we try to do is act courageously in the face of hostility and speak prophetically in the face of injustice. And now let me say a few words about the Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman. He has a very robust resume. He has a lot of good academic training. He has won numerous awards as a champion of democracy. He has served in many different places through his ministry. He's been a prison chaplain, a university chaplain, a pastor of a local church, and now he is president of the North Carolina NAACP. But for my money, more importantly, he has been with me from day one that I became the executive director of the North Carolina Council of Churches. He was, my first day, the president-elect, and so then became the president, and then was past president, and has walked with me every step of the way formally in my work as the executive director, but informally as well. T. Anthony never failed to return one of my phone calls if I needed to work out something with him or needed counsel or needed advice. And I've ever more been grateful for his support in what for me was a very new role. So T. Anthony, without further ado, please tell us how we as people of faith can continue to insert our voices in the public square and influence policy in North Carolina for positive change. I bring you T. Anthony Spearman.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that introduction, very humbling introduction. And thank you, Henry, for the invitation to come and share with everyone tonight, the Triangle Interfaith Alliance. I appreciate all of the members of that august body, as well as the Methodist Federation for Social Action, the North Carolina Council of Churches, and all of the other organizations that have come together this evening. And I was asked to share with you all tonight around the subject matter of how faith communities, how can faith communities come together to support democracy. And I would like to come to you with the topic tonight, meeting the other. Can we talk? Meeting the other. Can we talk? In order that we embody a kind of wholeness and freedom and justice that the world does not recognize or even know exists, it is imperative that we strive to attain to the attribute of God called peace. One of my favorite authors of all time is known by the name of Ra'un Nefer Amen, who has developed one of the most consistent treatises on peace that I have come across in recent years. He calls it the Metu Neter, or Word of God. He recommends his readers to affirm that they have been created in the likeness of a peace that nothing can disturb. When we reclaim that peace, we attain to our reason for coming into existence, which he purports to be the enjoyment of life. Ra'un Nefer Amen goes on to state 3 certainties. We can be at peace through the realization that being at peace is the natural response to adversity. We can be at peace through the realization that the adversity is not against us. We can be at peace through the realization that spiritual power is mobilized by the word of God. The Lenten season is a season when Christians can take a look at themselves and their relationship to Christ. When we can hold our lives up to God and ask him to turn on the searchlights and help us to examine our lives. Lives that have not been made perfect yet, because if truth be told, there are other things, other gods, small g, that we place before the one true God. Lives filled with trivialities, frailties, and frivolousness, because we have transferred our loyalty from God's spirit to an object, and we seem to be naturally prone to doing the things that ought not to be done. There's still a little bit of dirt swept under the rug of our lives. And we're so busy searching for meaning that what we search for has often become meaningless. The soil of our lives has become hardened by the traffic of familiar ideas, which have caused us to become impenetrable to any truth. Yes, the Lenten season is a time when we can call on the Lord and ask him to create and make in us new and contrite hearts, that we, worthily lamenting our sins and acknowledging our wretchedness, may obtain of the Lord, the God of mercy, perfect remission and forgiveness. And while some of us will get defocused due to some of the traditions attached to the Lenten season, because we have developed theologies of glory rather than theologies of the cross, and bent on understanding God in our finite way, that we often pull him down from heights unknown to levels we can attain, when all we need to do is enter into his peace. And one sure way that faith communities can come together to support democracy is to enter into his peace. Just listen to the charge of peace that Jesus leaves his church in John's 14th chapter and 27th verse. Peace I leave with you, he says. My peace I give unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. I cherish the fact that this Savior gives not as the world gives, but as eternity gives. And if truth be told, we all know some of the manifestations of his peace. Valuing persons over property, valuing public concern over private interest, valuing equity over elitism, valuing well-being over productivity, valuing human dignity over competence, seeking power for the oppressed, and seeking right-mindedness for the fragmented. The governance of our lives according to these manifestations of his peace can clearly lead to more opportunities of meeting the other and entering into dialogue unafraid. Thereby, we are enabled with the ability to talk across religious barriers, racial barriers, social barriers, religious barriers, political barriers, across a multitude of barriers, all because we strive toward the manifestations of his peace. The reclamation of peace means that you are making a concerted effort to practice not giving way to fear. You cannot allow your heart to be troubled or afraid. Yet, living in a world where difference has become more acceptable than similarity, a world where divisiveness is more flattering than togetherness, a world where consumerism and productivity are more prevalent than neighborliness, it is not difficult at all to get consumed by fear, lose all faith, and forfeit the ability to come and reason together as God's prophet Isaiah beckons to us, because fear runs so deep among us. Fear has done and is doing a number on us that denies us the sacred right to deeply dialogue with one another. Where there is fear, there can be no peace. And where there is no peace, meeting the other becomes virtually impossible. But why are we so afraid? I'm so glad you asked that question. While serving as both the president of the North Carolina Council of Churches and the president of the North Carolina NAACP, I attempted to model fearlessness to those I served. At the council, it was difficult for me to conceive how far the council had moved away from that which carved out its existence in the first place. That is, according to Sister Evelyn Mattern, who wrote a history of the council's first 50 years and entitled it, "We Come Together by Working Together, the First 50 Years of the North Carolina Council of Churches." The council, and I quote, "is the story of persons, religious leaders struggling to respond in faith to the signs of their times. And the revolutionary influence of one man more than any other must always be cherished and remembered if the work of the council is to flourish and grow." That man was H. Shelton Smith, who, according to Sister Evelyn, was a native of Brown Summit, North Carolina, and during the 1920s worked as director of leadership education with the International Council on Religious Education in Chicago. And in that capacity, he organized ecumenical, interracial camps in many parts of the country, but never in the South. In 1931, Smith sensed a calling back to the South where he had been born. And upon his return, when asked by Duke University to set up a religious education program, came face to face with some major obstacles. Yet, he met some far-seeing religious leaders like Episcopalian Bishop Edwin A. Pennick and Methodist Bishop Paul B. Kern. They discussed the possibility of a state council of churches from 1931 to 1935. That's 4 years. And in 1935, the council was finally formed. The first two committees established were directed to work on race relations and temperance. Those who met together over the course of those 4 years believed that the collective ills of society were to be transformed, and to this end, envisioned an interdenominational agency to deal with problems of social justice, racial relations, or problems that confront the churches. In 1939, the council hired Ernest J. Arnold to be its executive secretary. And he set a vigorous pace for pursuing 1, prison reform, 2, war relief, 3, youth ministries, and 4, race relations. Yet even though Arnold's vigorous pace in pursuing race relations, Madden reports that although the racial concern had been on Shelton Smith's mind as one of the founding purposes of the council in 1935, not until 8 long years later was there passed a unanimous resolution to invite the Negro churches to enter the council as full members. I found that fact to be so inconceivable and unbelievable that I yearn to learn more about how this thing called race has the power to spread such fear before us that we shrink back at the mention of its name. My brothers and my sisters, can we talk? As fate would have it, I stumbled upon one of H. Shelton Smith's books that provided tremendous insights to the vision of the man. In that book entitled In His Image But, Racism in Southern Religion 1780 to 1910, Smith examines the role Southern churches played in the development of racism. It's sad and depressing, and I'm committed to being the channel through which we open new discussions. My brothers and my sisters, can we talk? On page 74, Smith declares, and I quote, "The South's peculiar institution, that is slavery, increased dramatically after 1800. Within the next 3 decades, more than 1 million Blacks were added to the region's population. In the meantime, however, neither the churches nor the manumission societies offered effective resistance to the growth of human bondage. The system of Negro slavery was thus destined to continue indefinitely unless some powerful extra Southern force could be pitted against it." End quote. Smith had the faith to believe that powerful extra Southern force to be the church. Can we talk? There were other connections made to peace and justice, such as the following, which was recorded in the celebration of Race Relations Sunday, 1945, the appalling catastrophe of this Second World War makes it necessary for the churches to face the solemn fact that unless the spirit of Christianity is sown in the hearts of men, a third world war may be a matter of time. Things cannot be settled permanently unless they are settled right. Things cannot be settled right until they are settled in the spirit of the master. The ideal of human brotherhood is the only basis upon which peace can be built. Mankind must be brotherized, or it will be brutalized. It is the Black man's misfortune to live amid a people whose laws, traditions, and prejudices have been against the Black man for centuries. Indeed, it has ever been the policy of a certain class of Americans to keep the Negro down while announcing peace, peace, when there is no peace. Once again, I exclaim, can we talk? I wonder how this world would look if each time one of us moved in the way of othering someone, that we would pause and seek to brothering that someone. Always remembering that love, God's love in us, does not insist on its own rights or its own way, for love is not self-seeking. My brothers and my sisters, I hope and pray that we can talk today. After mediating since March 24th, 2020, the North Carolina NAACP, the ACLU, Forward Justice, Disability Rights North Carolina, the National Juvenile Justice Network, Emancipate North Carolina announced the settlement agreement, securing at least 3,500 early releases from state prisons, making it among the largest prison releases from COVID-19 litigation. In a nation that deems mass incarceration a priority over mass education, this is huge. This is enormous and evidence that we support democracy. We won't get far in our efforts to meet the other and build bridges and repair the breaches that European colonialism and slavery created in the Holy Creator's human family over the past 4 centuries unless we get real with each other and talk through these serious issues. Getting real is to become willing to take a crash course in the histories of our religion and the history of white supremacy that has reigned here in North Carolina far too long. The North Carolina NAACP took the lead in exhuming the buried history of the 1898 Wilmington pogrom, where leading white supremacists destroyed the brains, the newspaper, and the will of the delicate white-black fusion movement in the best and biggest port city in our state at the time. The Eastern District, where I have participated in this type of forum before. We all know the drill. 3 or 4 of us who are presumed to know what we're talking about are given a few minutes to spell out some premises and sometimes spell out some promises to the people in the audience who sit alone with their own thoughts and experiences. The organizers' dream is that we won't talk too long up here and that a lively discussion takes place. My premise and my promise is that we don't need a whole lot of talk. We know how to tear down the walls of racism. Let's start working with each other. Hand me some tools. So my first point is this. I suggest we pass a resolution, a commitment to take back to our respective faith traditions that all of us resolve to learn about the Wilmington program. There are already great pieces of literature about it. The North Carolina NAACP and our history chair, Dr. Tim Tyson, has written one of the best books that there's out there. Perhaps an interfaith committee can be constituted today to figure out how we can exhume these terrible moments in our history. Look at them square in the face, talk about them, an act of respect for the truth and for African Americans that will go a long way toward plowing the ground for more interfaith actions together. My second point comes from the work the North Carolina NAACP did when the Jesse Helms all-white caucus that has seized Mr. Lincoln's once righteous Republican Party pulled one of their many dirty tricks, scheduling a constitutional amendment vote against people of the same sex falling in love with each other and wanting to make a legal commitment to each other, which the state calls marriage, and which all religions believe is a good thing. Every pastor, imam, rabbi, and other spiritual leader has experienced the agony of a young person in love with someone, but not sure what to do. There is a natural, I would say a godly need, human need for partnership. There are too many lonely people in this world. As Simon and Garfunkel has asked, all the lonely people, where do they come from? The lesson we learned in the North Carolina NAACP when the extremists came down on the side of hate, cynically trying to split the African-American electorate from the LGBTQ and their families' increasing voting power, was to deal with it straight on. As I said in my opening, if we don't talk about difficult new relationships, the silo makers have already won. My friend, Bishop William J. Barber, and I, with scores of Black leaders, many reluctantly, we admit, determined to expose the cynical split 'em up wedge of the Helms Caucus. We traveled the state urging Black voters not to fall for the devious, divisive trick. I must admit, their word, sometimes discouraging words and times. My devotion to Jesus was questioned by a handful of fellow pastors, and I used the word fellow intentionally, for our position was never questioned by any female clergy. The lesson the NAACP learned, dare I admit the lesson I learned, was taking this kind of political risk. It's not hard as people think. I have made some of the best political and personal friends in my life from this struggle. I've learned more about lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transgenders, and young people who like to say, I'm queer, I'm here, get used to it, than I ever thought I would. It has made me love Jesus more. It has made me read our holy book and the Quran with new eyes. It has made me more empathetic. The same thing happens every time we take what I hope our Jewish sisters and brothers and Muslim sisters and brothers will call the Moses step into the raging waters of the sea. You must get wet before God steps in right on time and parts the waters. Over the past few years, and perhaps the most rewarding work we are presently involved in, helping our Latino sisters and brothers enjoy the safety and love of God's houses, sanctuary, we learned the lesson of the Moses step again. To sum up the two lessons, we must swallow our own fears of being ostracized and step into the waters of hate and fear directly if we are to bulldoze the silos created by a tiny minority of Europeans who invented verbal silo words like race, the religion, and holy wars. And to make a second motion for another working committee or task force before we leave, let us, on this February 25th, 2021, make this gathering of all the souls present here tonight be the takeoff runway for building fledgling friendships with our LGBTQ friends, our Latino friends, our Muslim friends, our Jewish friends, our Black friends, and each other. I want to thank you for allowing me to share tonight and look forward to the questions that you may have and to the work and working the rest of our lives on supporting our democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Spearman. I would like to invite those of you who have heard these challenging words to put questions in the chat window if you would like to pose those questions to Dr. Spearman. I'm going to start the ball rolling to Anthony while we wait on folks to type things. As you were talking about fear and using the peace of Christ as the antidote to fear, it also made me think about that other dividing wedge in humanity, greed. Of course, greed was woven through everything that you talked about. Certainly greed is the foundation for the slave industry. Greed is the foundation for so many of the things that divide us. And I wondered if you wanted to say anything else in particular about how greed and fear, as two sides of the same coin, continue to separate us into false categories and false classes, and even to coin a phrase that's a popular book right now, false caste systems.
Yeah, Jennifer, I made an attempt to make it a point not to say anything about what occurred in our nation's capital on January 6th, because I'm still rather tender as it relates to that occasion, that insurrection, whatever incendiary words that you can attach to it, and genuinely believe that greed indeed was at the core of the entire thing. And I thought that the brilliance, as far as I was concerned, of the managers, the House managers, as they made their presentations, was very telling, and the reaction of those who did not intend to move an inch, despite some of the evidence that was brought forth to them. I found myself wondering, what would have happened had that group that was gathered there that day were of my hue and my complexion. And the only thing that I can come away from it with is that they would not have even gotten close to gaining entry to the Capitol building that particular day, because and even if it were the few that it was of the police officers that were there, the Capitol Police that were there, they would have mounted up against them in such a way that the half would not have been told. It would not have been told. And so, I'm still trying to, by faith, do all that I can to reckon with that, and how to continue to live out the days of my life in this contrived nation, deliberately contrived nation that is not a friend to people who look like me. Although we are doing everything that we can to try our best to be the peacemakers that can place a conscience, in the center of this nation that seems to have gone down the road of idolatry and guilt, and whatever other sins that and when you brought up greed, I started thinking about the 7 deadly sins, and I've committed them to memory as with the acronym PAGLES: pride, anger, gluttony, guilt, lust, envy, and sloth. Try to stay away from those. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I've rambled long enough.
More than answered my question. Let me offer you a question from Elise, who wants to know if you have any suggestions on how individuals or small faith communities can connect with each other. And she has "other" in quote because she's playing off of the title of your talk. How can we connect with the other and begin to develop these crucial foundational relationships?
Yeah, a few years back, the North Carolina NAACP, with the leadership of Dr. William J. Barber II, gathered together because we became acutely aware that many of us, those of us who are in what I would call the 99% minority, really, and over and against the 1% who are very wealthy and what have you. If we all could just come together and understand that the adversaries that are keeping us down and apart and trying to divide us are the same folk, the same people. And if we can come together over that understanding, that we would be able to mount up, rise up, and go back to our Father, much like the prodigal son, rise up and I love the verse over there in that parable that says he came to himself. If we can just come to ourselves to understand that, if you cut me, Jennifer, and I cut you, we're gonna say the blood that flows from our veins is going to be the same color. And but I'm saying all that to say that we came together and we developed this coalition, this fusion coalition that we called Historic Thousands on Jones Street, the Moral March on Raleigh, which we had our 15th annual on February 13th, this past couple of weeks ago. And we have been growing and growing ever since. It has mushroomed from a sweet 16 organizations from the first year in 2007. And a lot of people don't understand that the beauty of that. Even in 2007, that was prior to Barack Hussein Obama taking office in the presidency. This movement, this peace movement, this justice movement started here in the state of North Carolina. And it has grown and grown and grown. And it's being replicated all across not only the United States of America, but also in other countries around the world. And so, of course, many of the legislators called us moral morons. I'm glad to have been called a moral moron because there's so much change that's occurring. And I'm whoever asked the question, I'm saying all of this to say that we've got to come away from our silos, come together, get over our fears and anything else that is a shortcoming that we have, and just press our way forward, understanding that there are more similarities among us than there are differences.
I think piggybacking on that question a little bit is Henry's question. Let me circle back a little bit, and then I'm going to ask Henry's questions. I think one of the ways we can do what you've done on a large scale in our smaller communities is just start talking to people, right? I mean, if we can ever go back outside and start talking to people again. In our neighborhoods are people who worship differently than we do, who look differently than we do. In our schools, the parents that we meet in the schools where our children attend, I think we have to be intentional as individuals in seeking out those who we believe are other than we. Somebody's got to take the first step.
Right.
And you and the North Carolina Council of Churches, long before I was a part of it, were able to do that on a large scale, to come together and reach across the different divides. But I would say to Elise that you can also do that on a much smaller scale in your neighborhood and in your town. Then Henry followed up with the question of how is it that we can reconcile the evangelical support of the previous administration, especially the white evangelical leaders. Although I know that there is beginning to be a bit of a split in that evangelical world, and there are those who have come out forcefully and positively to condemn what happened in January. But in any event, I think the question is, how is it that we have a conversation with people who are so diametrically opposed to the values that we hold and really don't want to talk to us anyway?
Right. And Jennifer, I have often tried to. I'm an evangelical. You're an evangelical. We're evangelicals, but the those that go by the name evangelicals, there's some distortion that has entered into their understanding of the word. and I think one of the things that is, well, I can only, let me try to say something about it by way of what we call, Methodists call, the Wesleyan quadrilateral. That four-pronged kind of approach to do theological reflection, scripture, tradition, reason, and experience, and of course I think what they have kind of really caused to be overly distorted, or that they kind of tend to look at more than any of the others is at some points is tradition, and seem to just, well, what has happened, as I see it, is their God, small g, has become this nation, and so as a result, that's everything that they see is based on a nationalistic God. And of course that is a frame that is very, very disconcerting. That's I believe that's the frame that caused the Charlottesville. When I think of Charlottesville, I think of Heather Heyer and the young lady that lost her life there. And it probably was what caused the, was an attribute to what happened on January 6th as well. And I, when I think about the leaders, the Franklin Graham's of the world, I pray for them as much as I can. Pray for them, because I hate to say it this way, but they have lost their minds. I mean, they have really lost their minds. I'll just leave it at that.
I think there are many people on this screen that would agree with you that it does seem like a completely crazy way of interpreting faith. Do we have any other questions for Dr. Spearman tonight? Some of you are offering suggestions in the chat window of ways to connect in communities and in smaller places. If it would be helpful to you, I believe that we can send a participant list to all of you. It can, I don't really know if we can do that, but somebody on my staff knows if we can do that. So if we're able to do that, we'd be happy to help those of you who have signed on tonight stay in touch with each other and perhaps begin to find avenues to enact a couple or three of the challenges that Dr. Spearman has laid before us tonight. I'm seeing in the chat window that we can indeed keep you all in touch with each other.
I think that would be a wonderful start, a wonderful way to begin processing whatever we need to process. This last historic 1000 on Jones Street, our theme was hope in action, living a new world into existence. We framed some of that around, one of Paul's suggestions that over in Romans 4th chapter, where he talks about, things that are not yet known about. We serve a God who calls them into existence. And so we, are busying ourselves with reorganizing a new world around us. And this pandemic has certainly compelled us to do just that. As we sit here meeting and meet in these Zoom rooms, in these Hollywood squares all of the time, and oftentimes at the day's end, I am totally exhausted because we're meeting more now than we ever did before. So this is a golden opportunity. I mean, if there is a way that has been devised to get over your fears in the comfort of your own home and be bold enough to say what you have to say to somebody else, the one thing I can't do is break through this screen to get at you. If I get angry about something that you say, I have to calm down and see if I can relate to you, and rather than other you, to brother you. So there are all kinds of ways that we can get around doing what needs to be done. And aren't we all, I mean, if we take a look at the preamble to our Constitution, that we, the people, in order to do what? Form a more perfect union, which suggests that the union that they attempted to form in the beginning was perfect, but we, want to strive to make it more perfect, and move forward accordingly. So.
Michael has asked a question, asking for suggestions from you, Dr. Spearman, about what we can do together to begin to make change. So, what do you think are maybe 2 or 3 of the most important issues that we could come together around? You mentioned that we are the 99%. A win. We need a win. So what might be a couple of very important issues that we could come together and work on?
Well, certainly I presently am very, very concerned about the plight of criminal justice. I just really am. And I'm working to do all that I can to bring more justice to those who are incarcerated, not only those incarcerated, but I've started through one of the nonprofits that I founded a few years back. I have a tendency to go and sit in courtrooms where many of our, now that the students are not in school now, but when they were in school, sit in those courtrooms, and I was appalled by the numbers of young people that are being criminalized for doing simply some of the things that I did in school when I was a child. And because the world hadn't been as weaponized as it is today, that I came away from, whatever I came away from, not being a felon by the time I was 15, 16 years old. Sitting in the courtrooms for inordinate numbers of hours, trying to help young people, because, oftentimes it's as simple as sitting in a courtroom, grabbing and seeing what the proceedings are of a young person who has no clue about this man that they fear, grabbing them by the scruff of their neck and removing them from the school. I'm talking about a police officer, SRO, and just kind of, trying to get away, snatch away from that person. And they are charged with resisting arrest. And there's all of these fees and fines that they have to pay in order to be released. Otherwise, they're entered into the criminal justice system. And when they enter into the criminal justice system, they move from that to the prison, there to the prison through the prison pipeline. And it's just, it may be as simple as stepping forward, paying the $100 fee for this young person, and letting them know that there's somebody that cares about them, that will turn that life around. So it's, sometimes it's just that simple. But this system tends to do some things to us that are just really, that will get us into something for the rest of our lives. So we've just got to be creative in the ways that we think through some things. And it's just as simple as that oftentimes. So criminal justice is one of the areas. And I would dare say that, also now immigration has become one, matters pertaining to the livelihoods of those who are trying to find peace, trying to find a way to live out their lives in a peaceful way, and just have to make ends meet, and it's oftentimes difficult to do. So those are two right off the top of my head.
Good, those are good. I would add one of my personal favorites right now is the Raising Wages campaign. And they're all kind of erroneous and false reasons that
Yes,
folks give for why we can't raise a minimum wage. But anybody that's ever studied economics would know that more money in the pockets of people in this
exactly.
country is going to help the economy recover quicker than anything else. To say
Exactly.
nothing of the fact that we've got folks out here working 3 part-time jobs at minimum wage just to make ends meet.
Exactly. And what does that do? It causes a paucity in the lives of the family, you know, no quality time. You can't share quality time together and all of that. So the quality of life just goes down, down, down.
When we all received our first stimulus checks back in, I guess last summer, and the amount per person was $1,200. You all remember that, $1,200. And of course it phased out according to income levels. But I was just musing about this at dinner one night with my family. I said, well, how did they happen on the number 1,200? And my son pointed out that if you multiply minimum wage times 40, if you were working a 40-hour work week, times 4 weeks, which is a month, you get 1,200. Now think about that. That if you're working full time at minimum wage, that's $1,200 before taxes. But it wasn't it ironic that that was the number they used to calculate what the stimulus check would be?
Wow. Yeah. That's certainly a thought.
Henry, do you have some things you would like to contribute or ask?
Yeah, one of the questions I was asking, Illinois just today, maybe it was yesterday, just eliminated cash bail. And I was thinking how that has affected so many lives in North Carolina and probably around the nation, where, you know, we're supposedly founded on a system where you're innocent before proven guilty, but when it comes to the system, really is that, well, first you have to pay for it, and if you don't have the income, then chances are you're going to be spending some time in jail even before you get to trial.
Right. But you know, but the cash bail is supposed to be a last resort, actually. According to some of the statutes that are written and some of the laws that are on the books, cash bail is supposed to be one of the last measures that judges resort to. But you know, and that speaks to the whole notion of impartial judges and how important judges are in the scheme of things. And if we could, last year I fought quite a bit, I traveled around quite a bit to various venues and forums talking about, you know, fair courts and trying to see how many good judges we had over and against the ones that will just, you know, take the easy route and do what they, you know, just go ahead and apply these cash bails to these situations. And it's so very unfortunate. I don't know now, you know, we say that there are 3 equal branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, the courts. And right now I oftentimes am in fear of how it seems like one seems to enable the other, and seems to enable the other. They just seem to be working hand in hand against the good of this nation, against the good of our democracy.
The other thing I was thinking about is, since I like the way you describe Zoom as being Hollywood Squares, is the digital divide. A lot of people cannot work from home because they don't have internet connection, and plus students are suffering because they have to rely on hotspots.
Right.
I'm just wondering if it's possible if groups can come together to help out families, particularly those, because the digital divide is not just rural urban, but it's very much, there are urban deserts of internet connection. And if I'm wondering if groups can in some way support families that are faced with that.
Yeah. Actually, a few months ago, the state, and we were glad to work in partnership with them. The state approached the North Carolina NAACP because the infrastructure of the NAACP, North Carolina NAACP, is such that we have branches that are set up in every county in the state of North Carolina. 100 branches or 100 counties in the state of North Carolina, and we have representation in just about each one of them. I think Tyrell or Turrell, I don't know how you pronounce it, maybe one of the only ones that we don't have that presence, but they approached us to ask if we would assist them in identifying community spots there where they could strengthen the Wi-Fi and put hotspots in, and we were able to do that. So there was some strength, and we were glad to do that in light of the fact that many of the children who were now no longer in school and residing in housing developments and things of that nature were able to access the internet. I have a young man that I have endeared myself to, and he didn't even know after COVID set in and school was out that there was a computer there, or what do they call these? Not an iPad, but whatever they call those devices. That there was one there for him to get, but yet and still as he got it, he couldn't use it in his home. He had to go to a place, across the street or somewhere where he could get on the internet. So yeah, there are so many disparities that we have to face and help people through.
There was a question further up the page that's disappeared, and I'm not sure who asked the question, but it was about the growing homeless population in Wake County, which can also be replicated in most of our cities in North Carolina. And the question is, how can the faith communities work together to address this growing homelessness issue?
Yeah,
and
which is also a good question, and one that we had some experience with a couple of weeks ago. There was as a matter of fact, it was Reverend Joe Hoffman from up in Asheville contacted me to make me aware that there was that the city of Asheville was moving in a direction that was very concerning to him. They were trying to remove people or cause people who were homeless not to be able to sleep under the bridges at night, on cold nights, and in the midst of all of this COVID. And he asked me if I knew anything about it, which I did not, but I immediately picked up my phone and texted the governor's office and told him how upset I was to even hear that. They got on it right away and they squelched it. So the city council wrote me a letter, and so did the Department of Transportation, apologizing and assuring me that they would not move in that direction, that they would do everything that they could to dignify those who are homeless. But that is an area that we have. I think that is something that churches can become more, if we have churches that have the kinds of facilities where they can assist the homeless population. I used to pastor a church when I was in Hickory, North Carolina. The church had a some showers in the bathrooms. And actually back in the back of the church, there was a growing population of homeless people. And when I was there, I would invite them in to, if they had it to refresh themselves, wanted to refresh themselves, I offered them the opportunity to, have a shower. And we never were able to, we were a real small church, so we really didn't have the strength to provide them meals, but there were certain members within the church who did. So so we were able to do something small, and there's nothing ever too small to do to make a difference in somebody's life. It doesn't take too much for us to be kind.
There are a couple of really good questions. I think now they've just popped up. One is to go back to your talk about the elements of peace and how we can use those elements of peace to talk about voting rights and voting issues that are important for the folks in North Carolina. Can you see those chats over there, T. Anthony, over on the left?
No.
Might be easier.
No, I don't see them. Let me see.
Okay.
Let me see. Pull them down. Overcoming voter suppression. If we,
Yeah.
what is that doing? Homeless.
Well, both of those I think are
Return to
good
elements.
questions about
It
using our
seems
powerlessness in
increasing the
healing
power
the
of
voices.
powerlessness is crucial for healing their voices. What elements of voting rights or voting issues are most important for us to work on in North Carolina? The voting piece, I think it's more and more. It gets more and more. Gosh, I'm searching for a word. Challenging. Diabolical, yes, but more and more, it becomes more and more challenging. It's more and more complex. It's like once you, for anybody that knows the story about the Lernaean Hydra, it's a mythological being that when you cut off one head, it grows two in its place. That's how voter suppression is. You get to the point where you're able to master one thing, and then the next thing you know, here's something else cropping up over here and over there and every other place. So I tell people all of the time, I've been telling the people in North Carolina and NAACP, we have been fighting the good fight with voter suppression for years, and we have the basic stuff down pat. We know how to fight that, and I've tried to use the analogy of low hanging fruit and high hanging fruit. So the low hanging fruit, we've mastered that. We have that down pat, but we've now got to move up to tackling the high fruit or the high hanging fruit, and now the high hanging fruit of voter suppression looms large in the voting machines themselves. Oftentimes, one of the things some of the litigation that the North Carolina NAACP has gone forth with is these ballot marking devices, which can be manipulated. Anytime you have a computer in between you and the vote, that vote can be tampered with. And people don't understand the basics of that, but it's so true. It's whoever is programming the machines that you use to vote, if they have a bias and they factor that bias into the machine, guess what? Your vote is tampered with. And that's the short and tall of it. I was so blessed last year to have gone and testified before the Congress, forgetting the name of the committee that I testified before, but I testified before them, and with the expertise. One of the other things that a lot of people can't understand about me is how I'm able to navigate my way to being the state conference president of the North Carolina NAACP and a member of the Board of Elections in Guilford County. They think that there's a conflict with that, but I've learned how to navigate my way through that and think it's wherein I'm able to gain certain expertise to help guide people through some of the maneuvers of voter suppression at some of the higher levels. Voter suppression is becoming more and more intricate. So certainly a person with regard to peace, as it relates to peace, it takes us to the wherewithal to be able to look into some of the intricacies of voter suppression to be able to master what's going on. So thanks for the question, and come and hang out with me sometime in one of the board meetings. Is there another, Jen? Let's see.
There is not another question. There's a comment that many of our interfaith partners are working hard to see that those who are sleeping on the streets are warm at night. And we appreciate that good work that they are doing, loving their neighbors.
Yeah. As complicated as voting rights is, the matter of redistricting, the right to vote doesn't help much if the districts are gerrymandered. Yeah. We've got to find some honest politicians, don't we? You know, and I think that if we were able to, we've definitely got to work on policies that are friendly to the common person. If we can somehow become masterful enough to have some policies that change, our lives can possibly change. And the whole notion of gerrymandering and redistricting is certainly one that I would hope that we would be able to get some good legislators to making some good legislation, passing some good legislation to cause that to happen. The other question, there are some of us in Hindu religion groups like Satya, Sai group and Senior Club who annually make warm blankets, gloves, etc. for our local homeless centers. Only this year we were not able to do that service due to COVID-19. That is who's this? Jyothi Kumar. Man, that's a wonderful ministry, a very compassionate ministry. Makes me think of Dorcas in the New Testament for those who are Christian orientation of faith. That's wonderful. I was talking to my wife last night. There was something came on the news about a woman who got killed or swept away in I think it was here in North Carolina. It might've been Texas. I think it was in Texas. Got swept away and they found some of her quilts, the quilts that she had made. And I was telling my wife, I said, you know, I remember when me and my sisters grew up, our parents are Southerners. They were from Fayetteville, North Carolina, but they raised us in New York. And the old folk had quilts that they passed down to the next generation. And I remember all of us had a quilt, a homemade quilt, quilts that were made by our grandmother or our great-grandmother. And I already remember I started missing my quilt yesterday and wondering where it was after such a long period of time. My mother and my father are both gone now, but those quilts were really, I mean, they were patchwork quilts that were handmade. And those things were so warm. I'll never forget the warmth that those quilts had. So those things that you all are making, those mittens or gloves and those warm blankets, those are, I'm sure that someone would be blessed by that.
I think this, hello, this is Jyothi Kumar.
Hi, Jyothi.
Hi. I think this group on the long run should have a communication channel so that where, like you said, someone needs some help, homeless or food distribution or something like that, it can be posted on the bulletin board, like, so that everybody can participate and everybody can do something about it.
Yeah.
And also maybe some type of education is important, because a lot of people don't even know about other cultures and where we come from, and they all think that as if foreigners come into this country to make money. Not necessarily.
Right.
We are the productive, we are participating and then making this country look better. So, our own countries where we come from, they all feel brain drained. So we all come here and then not only help ourselves, also helping this country. A lot of people are very ignorant about that. They don't even know. As soon as, like I just watched on CBS News, all the Asian Americans, Chinese and, look-alike, everybody were being pushed down on the street.
Yeah.
And then in their own driveway, because someone ignorant called the COVID-19 virus as the Chinese virus.
Right.
You know who I'm talking about. So,
I know who you're talking about. I know. No. Is it Jyoti?
yeah.
No, I don't know who you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. I don't know. I don't know if you get that. I say that to say that I over the course of 4 years that person, that being was in the White House, I never got comfortable calling that individual by name. I always called that person number 45. That's how I identified him. And I continue to identify him that way today, number 45. But there's not much cause for me to have to do it now, because hallelujah, we were able to get him out of office.
Well, join the club. Me too.
Reverend Spearman, this is Councilman Rao from the town of Morrisville. I just wanted to thank you so much for such inspiring words, and the Interfaith Alliance for hosting this great event. And I just want to say that in Morrisville, we're a town that is a home of almost every faith in the world within our 10 square miles, and Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Baha'i. And I think it's so important to challenge local governments and cities to create an environment where we can encourage inclusion and learn from different cultures. I serve on the League of Municipalities Racial Task Force, and one of the things we're finding is that there's just such a problem with racial bias across.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. So one of the recommendations is developing anti-racist policies and making data out there available so people can know that within the Black community, only 46% own homes in America. Equity, providing those resources can also enable all communities to advance. And so hopefully we can work together to build bridges. And so I just want to.
That's wonderful.
Conversations are uncomfortable, but they have to be, done. So
that's wonderful. I wonder. You said councilman, right?
Yeah.
Councilman Rao. I wonder if I oftentimes what I would be willing to do, because I like that idea. I really like that idea a whole lot. If you could draft some type of a resolution that I could use in the North Carolina NAACP to share with the branches, to take to their city councils or county commissioners with regard to that, and we could see how we could push that idea across the state.
And I'll end with this, and I'm sorry to go over my time, but I mean, I've spoken at the MLK prayer breakfast many years ago, and my great grandfather was a freedom fighter in India. He actually was the Speaker of the House in India, and he left to join Gandhi's movement. And so I feel like we have to make sure that on, MLK Day and these kinds of days and they do a great faith prayer, but that we bring all the different faiths and communities so people don't just think it's just honoring one great American and international hero, MLK, but Gandhi and King, there's such a connection.
Right.
Because King learned this civil disobedience from Satyagraha and Mohandas K. Gandhi. So we need to make sure that when we go to MLK prayer breakfast after COVID, that we have Indians and Chinese and all religions and all faiths, not only as the clergy that are delivering the prayers, but also
Right.
the audience.
Sure.
It's a tendency in America, I notice, for people to, everyone wants to do their thing and then they want to get back. And until I mean, I'm not saying anyone here because you guys are so special. I want to thank all of you all for putting this event together, because the Triangle Interfaith Alliance is just bringing so many faiths together. But there's a tendency to say, well, you know, that's not my day, so I'm not going to go. And we as leaders, that's what I'm encouraging. So I just want to, you know, yeah, I'll draft something. I don't have your contact information. I can get on the website. And I want to thank Henry, Jared, and everybody. I'm sorry I went over my time, and I just wanted to thank you so much for putting this together. So.
Well, Henry does have my information, but I'm gonna drop my email in the chat. All right, because I really would like for you to send that to me.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I want to thank Jennifer Copeland too, and everybody.
Okay, there's my email is in the chat there. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're a really eloquent pastor, and
Bless you, man.
hearing you, so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anthony, I want to ask you one more question, and I think Henry's gonna pray us out of here, maybe.
Okay.
The question came up early on: where can I hear Dr. Spearman preach? And I think Dr. Spearman is not pastoring a church right now,
Right.
but he might preach on a regular basis.
Yeah, Dr. Spearman's not pastoring right now, and Dr. Spearman will take preaching engagements, but hasn't taken any recently because many of the African American churches have been, we've been doing virtual services. But I can come to where you are if you invite me.
There you go. There you go. Thank you again, T. Anthony. This has been wonderful.
If I may make a quick comment, there is a group called the Interfaith Group. So you may have to check with check about them also, and then so that you don't duplicate something that they are doing.
Okay.
Okay, well, first I want to thank Dr. Spearman for taking the time out of his schedule to be with us tonight. I think this is about the 4th or 5th time I've heard Dr. Spearman, and he never disappoints. And I would encourage you to please engage him and also be supportive of the NAACP of North Carolina. They are definitely fighting the good fight for a more fair and just North Carolina. I'd also like to thank once again the North Carolina Council of Churches for hosting this event, for providing the technical assistance and doing the registration. That was a big load off the shoulders of TIA. So thank you very much to the North Carolina Council of Churches. As they've said, they have been supporting the separation of church and hate since 1935. And they also probably would definitely like you to look at their legislative agenda. This year is the long session for the North Carolina General Assembly, and already they're up to mischief down on Jones Street. So particularly, they've got a new bill about having concealed weapons in houses of faith. So please contact Jennifer if you're interested in Council of Churches about any of the legislation that's coming up. And for the Triangle Interfaith Alliance, like I said, this was our annual dinner time. We do meet once a month at 7 p.m. On the 4th Thursday of each month. So anyone who might be interested in joining us, just look us up. You can Google Triangle Interfaith Alliance. And we would love for you to come to our meetings. I think our next meeting is actually 4 weeks from now, and I think we're supposed to hear from the new director of the Interfaith Food Shuttle. at our next meeting. And to those with Methodist Federation for Social Action, there's a lot happening in the United Methodist Church now, and we'll be getting out a newsletter sometime this month. So to close it out, if we could have a brief prayer, bow our heads. God of all creation, thank you very much for this time together. Letting us know that you are the God of all of us. Let us be mindful that we are all your children, regardless of our faiths, regardless of our skin color, regardless of our gender, regardless of our gender identification or sexual orientation. Be with us as we try to create a more fair and gentle world, and let us go in peace. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.